This is the e-learning podcast, episode number 49.
We had developed from the same course material, the 3 to 4 hours of training course material, a 30-minute virtual reality training module. And we took another group of agri-dealers through that VR training module. And there was a 45% increase in knowledge retention.
Welcome to the e-learning podcast from lmspulse.com. My name is Stephen Laddick, and I'm the director at LMS Pulse. I have a question for you. When will virtual reality and XR in general become mainstream in education? After listening to my guest for today, who is Natalie Miller, the founder of XR Global, I want you to ask yourself that question again and let me know if our conversation has changed your mind. Natalie moved to South Africa in 2006 for an opportunity in the international development space with Operation Smile. After countless founding and leadership positions, she saw an opportunity to use mobile learning and mixed reality in emerging markets, leading to the creation of XR Global in 2020. In this hyper-realistic conversation, we talk about Natalie's amazing journey, including an Oxford MBA, a Skoll Fellowship, stints in business development, Fintech, consulting, healthcare, and ultimately XR Global, her next step in her quest for social innovation and technology. We also talk about the outstanding results XR Global has made possible, not just with double-digit growth in knowledge retention using VR experiences, but also with making XR affordable and scalable in the emerging world. We also talk about why, according to Natalie, mixed reality should be on the radar of e-learning professionals regardless of where they are in the world. One hint, you can't check your phone while taking a lesson with a VR headset on. And then finally, we talk about the importance and value of high-level partnerships, as long as they are based on innovations that actually get results and shape the conversation. But before we get started, a quick word from our sponsors.
The e-learning podcast is sponsored by the e-learning Success Summit. Learn from more than 40 experts how to teach, work, and learn online without being overwhelmed. Get your free ticket to the summit at elearningsuccesssummit.com. And lmspulse.com, your best source for news, information, and resources for e-learning professionals for more than 10 years. Get our free roundup of the week's top news at lmspulse.com.
Hello, Natalie. Welcome to the e-learning podcast. How are you today?
I'm well. Thanks very much for having me.
My pleasure. Totally. Natalie, as I ask everyone, where do we find you sitting today?
I am actually in Cape Town, South Africa, and I have been here for 15 years now. So this is my home, my beautiful home.
No one, you know what? Your accent tells me, Northern New Jersey, but that's
Northern Virginia.
Cape Town, South Africa? No, but okay. No, that's fantastic. Awesome. I've already introduced you in the beginning of the podcast here, but before, why don't you just, explain who you are in your own words? I'll just leave it right there. Tell us about who Natalie is.
That's a good question. Who is Natalie? Well, I'm an entrepreneur. I guess, that's kind of a driving force for me. I've really been able to delve into lots of sectors, which we can get into later in terms of that. But, I guess first and foremost, I am a wife and mother of two, a little boy who's 3.5 and a little girl who's 9 months. So,
whoa, congratulations. Nice. Awesome.
Yeah, it's back to infant times, which you forget after the first one. But yeah, no, she's amazing. She's a very good baby.
Nice, excellent. Yeah, and as everyone knows who's listened to this podcast at all, I've got 3. So we're out of the diaper stage. But for your knowledge, they're almost 13, 10, and 7. So
sweet.
3's the new 2. I'm just telling you, 3's the new 2.
Nope, we're done. We're done.
So, and the last question before I kind of just take us a little further, I've been using this as a time capsule as well. Tell me, what's the COVID situation like in South Africa, in Cape Town right now?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, obviously I'm from the States and I've just watched my family and friends, and it's been quite devastating there, obviously. Here, we're in Africa, and so we're faced with malaria and tuberculosis and all of that, and not that it wasn't and isn't serious. We all wear masks. I have several of them right here next to me. Going in public, that's law. But, we have been quite back to our normal schedule for a year now or so. Of course, we're now back to level 2 because there's a scare over a third wave. We're not sure if we really had that or not. Numbers did come up, but not drastically. So, yeah, I guess for here in South Africa, economy and kind of surviving is sort of the first priority. So
sure, yeah.
Trying to balance those priorities of safety and
sitting here in Mexico, we've seen the same thing as well, right? This country has stayed open the entire, there has been no closure other than specific institutions. Schools have been closed until actually 3 days ago when we went to green, Semáforo Verde. So yeah, my kids have been online for 14 months now. So
wow,
that's just the way it is. So, but it's been really, really interesting seeing how different parts of the world have dealt with it differently, and it's one giant social experiment. So there we are, June 2021. There's the South Africa experience. Excellent. Thanks for sharing. One of the things that I thought really cool to start this conversation would be just how you and I connected, because we connected through LinkedIn. I kind of was checking out where you came from and what you did, et cetera, and we found a really common thread through our work with NGOs, with the social sector, the social enterprise sector, and those kinds of things. And then bam, we both ended up in the learning sector, right? Which for many people in development, that makes a lot of sense, right? But I want to spend 5 minutes here in the beginning. Just tell us about your journey. Like, how did you get to, first of all, we should tell everyone you now deal with, you're now running a virtual reality training company, essentially. Let's characterize it as that. How'd you get there? Like, clearly this was not what you woke up with, 20 years ago and said, I'm going to be a VR expert. Like, how did you get here?
Winding road as they are. Actually, it's been quite a journey when I go back and think about it, because actually I was in broadcast journalism at university.
Okay, so at least you had a start in it. Like, I didn't even have.
I should be good at this, but I actually was very bad at it, and I kind of got this. I ended up doing this crazy thing called Semester at Sea. I'm not sure if you've heard of it. It's an amazing, 100 days on a cruise ship. We went around the world taking classes, when we're not in country, and spending 5 days in each country when we're there. And for me, we left from Vancouver, went Japan, Hong Kong, Vietnam, Malaysia, India, Egypt, Turkey, Croatia, Bosnia, Italy, and Morocco, and then landed in Fort Lauderdale. And for me, that introduced the world to me, and different cultures and needs. I actually went and helped at a earthquake that had happened in Turkey. I don't know if you remember, in 1998, it was like one of the worst earthquakes that had hit them. And I went to go try to, in 1999, help out for a little bit while we were there, because they were still doing recovery efforts, and ended up following around the ICRC and Red Cross. And that delved me into kind of the humanitarian sector in a way. I was going to go into broadcast journalism. I went backpacking first, ended up with this job in London, but then AOL took over Time Warner, or vice versa, whatever happened there. And like the CNN and Time show that I was going to work with
disappeared.
It disappeared. So I said, let's move to Australia, because why not? I fell in love with Sydney. And then through that journey and backpacking, I stayed with family, friends, and they were like, what do you want to do? And I was like, help people, and, go overseas and travel and work with other cultures. And they're like, well, have you ever heard of Operation Smile? And I was like, oh, no, and was introduced to Operation Smile. So long story short, I became mission coordinator for them in 2002, and ended up living mostly in Asia. Eventually, I proposed opening up South Africa as a regional base to open up South Africa, and they said no. and ended up
I love it. I always, sometimes the no's are the most powerful, life moments, right? Sometimes it's like, oh, I guess I will make a different decision. Okay. Yeah.
Exactly. Or I will say, okay, look, they said, good idea, we're not ready. And I was like, all right, well, and one of my surgeons said, come take this course with ICRC that I teach, and we'll surf in the mornings and afternoons. And, you can stay at the dorms in Hawaii. And I was like, So a night after, or a night before leaving for Hawaii for this course, Optimal called me back and they're like, well, if you move to China for us for a year, then you can then try to open up South Africa. So yeah, I ended up actually moving to China.
Nice.
And living in Hangzhou, 2 hours south of Shanghai. Not speaking any Mandarin, although both my dad and brother are fluent, and my dog only listened to Mandarin commands. But that was about the extent of my Mandarin. And then ended up moving to South Africa eventually in 2006.
Nice. And then this is where you've been. So how did you get from like smack dab, obviously, right in the middle, Operation Smile, ICRC? I'm hearing all of these acronyms that are from a former life of mine as well, that I love. How did you get from there to one day waking up and saying, you know what, I need to start a virtual reality training company?
Yeah. So, well, I guess, we opened up 14 countries from South Africa for Operation Smile. So I had an amazing adventure of, really getting to know and love a lot of the countries on this beautiful continent, and doing a lot of both free surgeries and life-changing surgeries for children through my volunteers, but also, training, building capacity was a big priority for us. And so we were doing what we could in terms of training and, everything from, training general practitioners, because there were no surgeons in Rwanda at that stage, but, to training nurses and OTs as speech therapists and so forth. So I was really kind of,
I don't want to skip over that. When you're saying we were doing training, so, I mean, were you actually doing like, here is the surgical procedure kind of training? It wasn't just sort of like high level, hey, here's how you get people into the program kind of training. Yes? Or?
Well, we were doing all types of it. So we actually started a program in Rwanda that we called Rotations with Partners in Health, which is another fantastic organization. And we started doing, training rotations. So we'd have small teams of plastic surgeon, anesthesiologists, nurses, and eventually other specialties that came over and actually lived in that area for several weeks at a time, and they did that throughout the year. So we did that type of training, so really in-person training, to doing trying to orchestrate kind of trainings through 2D videos, and that was for mostly like nursing training or play therapy training or speech therapy training, or a lot of the other kind of specialties, not necessarily surgery, although we did delve into that. So there was a lot of aspects to the types of training that we did, but all, what I realized later, and again, what led me down this path is, are we always, I guess, putting a question to it, are we always effective in the way that we train? Are we, what is the knowledge retention rate? So, so to kind of, move past that. So when I eventually, and I mean, Operation Smile, people used to make fun of me because it was my life. But I ended up going to business school in the UK.
Oh, okay.
And focusing on social entrepreneurship, and looking at the for-profit models. And while there, I did a project with a one-year-old startup, a Fintech startup called, at that time, it was Mobile Transaction Zambia Limited, but now they're called Zona, and help them build their agent network, living, in a cottage behind the CEO's house in Zambia. And eventually, when I went back to South Africa. I started kind of my own consultancy supporting nonprofits in fundraising and expansion and so forth. And then I ended up kind of going back into that fintech company after they raised a Series B. So I led their expansion and commercial partnerships. But saw a lot on how we were kind of training our agent networks, and that's a big thing here. And in most, I guess a lot of the emerging markets, agent networks are starting to be a real asset in terms of actually getting to most of the population. So yeah, I saw kind of what we were doing well and what we definitely were not doing well, and some of the challenges there. And then, I had my son, and then somehow hopped into agri, and I was asked to run an agri tech company, which basically had a proof of concept. And so I helped them to build a SaaS platform. And this agri tech company was looking at visibility and traceability in the value chain for small farmers, and connecting them with large buyers. So we had Nando's as a client, for example. I'm sure even in the States, you know.
Sorry.
Okay. It's a fantastic,
I don't know Nando's.
It's a fantastic, fancier fast food chain.
Okay.
I went to the grand opening in Alexandria, Virginia. So they did start, But yeah, so it was there when I was running the agri tech company that I was at in Indaba, and ended up meeting my now partners. And that I guess is the beginning of how this all began.
Fantastic. So now we've gotten to that stage. What did you see before in training that was not working that you are now seeking to solve with XRG? I was about to say XGRs, XRG.
XRG, XR Global. So I guess the biggest thing is, we're making such leaps and bounds in terms of technology in so many different sectors, but it feels like in the teaching and learning sector, we're still so old school. We're still using PowerPoint. We're still doing classroom training. It's just when you take, for example, so I'll tell you what blew me away.
Please,
with my partners that kind of led me to join forces and kind of start up XRG. So two of my partners that I met, they had kind of in a prelude to starting XRG, had done this study with a USAID funded Feed the Future program. And that USAID was actually looking at what is the effectiveness of the training that they were providing. And they were using IFC course materials, and they were doing classroom instructor-led training. So what we did is what they did, and what excited me enough to even start this with them, is they took a control group of agri dealers. So agri dealers, for those who are not in the agri sector, are kind of the small shop owners that are selling inputs or seeds, for example, to farmers. So those kind of distributors of agri products. So we took basically a control group of those agri dealers, and we did the traditional training. We had them go through the 3-4 hour classroom training, and those agri dealers had a 5% increase in knowledge retention from baseline.
Okay.
And then we had developed from the same course material, the 3 to 4 hours of training course material, a 30-minute virtual reality training module. So covering the same material. And we took another group of agri dealers through that VR training module. And there was a 45% increase in knowledge retention.
Just a little bit. I mean, whatever. I mean, this wasn't like a spike or anything.
Wow. And so that blew me away, because to be honest, I mean, how many of us have been in classes and been on our phones and, been doing other things and completely distracted.
Sure.
But when you're in VR, you are immersed. You're having an authentic, like deep, authentic experience, and you're learning while doing, So, if you look at the kind of knowledge triangle they have, like we'll never say that VR is better than one-to-one in-person training. That's obviously the best. But if you can't do that,
there are people who would even argue that, just so you know.
I'm sure. Yeah. We're not going to touch that.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Sure.
No, but I mean, then you look at, how do we provide effective training in a scalable way, in a cost-effective way, without this kind of in person, or even with the in person, but not if you don't have the ability to do a one-on-one. And VR just takes it to another level. And yeah, so for me, that really kind of knowing what I have kind of been part of in both in the medical space, in the agri and fintech sector. And then, what I skipped over was I do a lot of training of entrepreneurs. So I'm involved in a lot of accelerators and entrepreneurial support, like as a mentor and coach. Mm-hmm. So even on that side, and I think one of the baffling things for me is like everybody knows, or most everybody knows, the value of VR when it comes to things that are safety related. So like mining or construction or things like that. But what we've been realizing and what we've been exploring as kind of this VR world is the massive value of soft skills training in VR. So for me, that's been like one of the greatest kind of learnings as part of this space.
Wow. I'm trying to think about what do I want to ask next? So tell me about, where is XR Global right now in terms of delivery? Like, have you bought like 10,000, Google Cardboards and, you're ready to throw out there? What platform are you, there's a ton of questions about how are you delivering at scale for the sectors that you're looking at, right? I mean, these aren't banks, these aren't oil companies. So I'm going to assume that they're resource poor. And so you've got to find a way to deliver at scale cost effectively. But you tell me, like, where are you at in the stage of actually rolling out training and those kinds of things? Or are you still in the development stage? Like what's the process, those kinds of things?
Yeah, well, I must say I'm the one that pushes back on our partners about, getting into any of the hardware side of it. So, we're on the content side of it. We're not going to, and that was one of my partner's proposals, just dump, a bunch of Pico headsets or, headsets in multiple countries. So, so basically we're a US registered company, but most of our team is in South Africa, Croatia. We have an amazing partner who used to be permanent secretary of agriculture in Rwanda. And we do have two partners in the States and doing some work in the States, but our main focus is emerging markets. So actually, it's a very good question because, like any early stage company, when we were starting out, the focus was we had to go for larger kind of clientele that had funding and enough to pay for it. So we started after that study, we started working with Feed the Future. We work with them in multiple countries, in Rwanda, in Mozambique. We just executed a training of trainers in Mozambique with Feed the Future, with Bayer, with Technology University, which was awesome because we had the students go out in the field with the agri dealers. It was great.
Awesome.
And I'm actually heading to Kenya in a couple weeks now to execute a pilot with YMCA and Habitat for Humanity, and a tech company in Kenya that's actually a US based one called iBuild. And we're doing a pilot as well on actual vocational training and basic training for, some are illiterate fundies, which are kind of low-level construction workers in Kenya. So we're doing like an intro to masonry tools, training, which is quite cool. So heading there for that. We're delving now, which I'm very excited about, obviously, because of my past, in the medical side of things. So we're looking at some speech therapy training modules, some work with community health workers, and others. So that's quite exciting. So yeah, I mean, I guess in terms of, so basically we started out in the agri sector. We're moving a lot into, attached to that agri sector is a lot in the financial services side, because there's a lot of fintech agri connection. And we just actually did a successful pilot with one of the largest banks in Africa, Absa Bank, which is great. So we'll see where that goes, because they're also keen on training not only their employees, but their agents. And I must say that in the States already, Bank of America has rolled out VR training to all 4,000 of their branches. So this is a big thing.
And what is that? Teller training? Is that loan officer training? What is that?
I actually don't know the specifics around the training. I know they're doing some internal training in terms of their staff, but I don't know if they're, what extent they're taking it. So yeah,
that's a huge little knowledge bomb you just dropped there. I mean, if B of A has just done 4,000, branches, and there's 2 Oculus Quests in each branch where, hey, look, your training for this week is a soft skills training on, client greeting, even just like salutations when somebody's coming in, like that's a huge, it blows my mind. Like that's a game changer, right? There's a lot of people.
Something like 75,000 headsets, Walmart.
Wow.
So, I mean, this is becoming more, I guess COVID helped to push it down the line and people to understand how, important and the potential around it. But yeah, I mean, it's coming very mainstream. Okay, I won't jump to mainstream.
I was just gonna say, we're still
more mainstream.
I think let's just say it's the technology has been accepted.
We'll leave it there.
It's totally okay for you to go into a pitch and say, hey, look, we can do this one of 3 ways. We can do this the hard way. We can do this hey, this is kind of innovative, or we can knock it out of the park. And knocking it out of the park means VR. We're going to change the experience. We're going to do it very differently, which is going to make all of you really, really uncomfortable, but the results are going to blow you away, right? And many, many companies will say, I'm a little risk adverse. I'm going to stick with, either A or B. But, more and more companies are going to choose C until that becomes the norm.
Yeah. So. And all you have to do is a pilot. I mean, especially like we just did such a low cost pilot with Absa, and they were.
So 2 questions for you. The first one is, when do you say no? When do you have a training or a learning solution that you're presented with, or somebody comes and you're just like, hey, VR is not that, that's. It's not, that's not this is too much, or, you're better off, probably just having a simple, like, in-person thing. Like when do you say no?
That's a really good question, because we haven't yet. And I'll tell you, like, one of the latest things we're doing, which is super cool actually, but people would probably, even my husband initially was like, in VR, like what's it? So there's you obviously know Red Bull. And Red Bull had an internal entrepreneurial program that was global called Red Bull Amapico.
Okay.
And that entrepreneurial academy was led by this great guy named Ian Calvert. And long story short, he ended up kind of taking the entrepreneurial community he built like outside of Red Bull, and he started a company called Further. Anyway, we just did kind of a VR experience, like a high performance VR experience with them. So what that is like taken from the Red Bull concept of, they take their high performing athletes and they do this exercise. And the whole point of the exercise is mind over matter, right? Sure. So it's how do we, we can do a lot more than our brain necessarily says we can initially. And so what they do is they have the athletes submerge into water and hold their breath. And then they take them out after, they time it, and then they take them out, and then they explain to them what your body can actually handle and a lot of the facts behind it. And then they do the exercise again. And
everybody 3X's or something like that.
Yeah. And then it's like, okay, well, you can do, 50% more than you think, or 3 times the weight, And so and Further does this with their entrepreneurs. They usually don't submerge them in water, but they have them hold their breath and hold their hand up. But we actually took actors and actresses and stuff, and we filmed in freezing cold Cape Town waters, a 360 VR video experience. And so taking them through this. And so they'll utilize it for part of their trainings in terms of allowing people to experience that reality. And so you probably wouldn't think from just thinking about it, like, oh, does this make sense in VR? But actually it's quite dramatic.
Wild.
Scalable.
The scalable, and so take me to the scalability. I mean, obviously the technology, the hardware, and the production. So there's kind of 2 sides of the hardware, right? One is whatever headset or whatever device you're putting on, but then there's also, I don't know if this is your team in Croatia or whatever, but you've got to produce the content correctly, right? So you've got to have a camera that can do a 360. You've got to have the ability to then render that and, turn it into something that goes into the headset. Is that still cost prohibitive, or could you and I, can I go on Amazon today and buy all that for $1,000 and start my own VR company tomorrow?
No, of course not.
Shush! What do you say?
No, so yeah, I guess there's a few pieces of this. There's kind of like how we put together what is like a VR training module, and then there's delivery, right? So because I have fun props, I'll start with delivery. So, when we looked at, okay, what is our mission? Our mission is to lower the barrier of entry to VR in emerging markets. And how do we do that? Well, mobile VR, right? So this is what, kind of like what you used to call Google Cardboard.
Right.
But it's just plastic, and it's created by a manufacturer in Houting in Joburg, basically, in which you just slide your mobile phone in and you have mobile VR experience. And this is less than $15 branded headsets, so forth, right? So we were like, okay, this is the avenue. If you can, especially during COVID, obviously there's a kind of one-off challenge of dispersing headsets, which is another story because there's access to many local manufacturers of these. I mean, we just did Juma. Well, I'm not sure. Juma was one of our IPOs here in Africa. That so it's a local, like an local Amazon.
Okay.
Delivery to our Kenya clients of headsets that were super cheap. I mean, under $5, right?
Wow.
And delivered to their door. So there's a lot of accessibility in terms of the headsets, and we can kind of push content to the phones. You can do a link in which you can actually, even if you don't have a headset, see the module in monoscopic version, when we call it, but like on your phone without the headsets, right. And then you can put it in the headsets. And one of the coolest things for us with the challenges in Africa of internet, and as you might be able to see, my lights are out.
It's getting darker. It's getting darker. Yeah.
We have load shedding here. And luckily, I have a UPS to keep the internet going. But internet is an issue. So, basically, you can kind of download the modules on the mobile phone when you're at a cafe or when you do have access, and you can take it home and do it offline, which is obviously important in some emerging markets. And so that's one way of delivery. And, there are great things about it. And then there are challenges. And some of the challenges here are that not everybody has smartphones, and we're not yet there in terms of every Chinese smartphone on the market being VR enabled and having the RAM and memory that is necessary for a good experience. But it's getting there. And that is definitely the future. What we are kind of pursuing a lot with our clients now. So you mentioned Oculus by Facebook. This is a competitor. It's a Pico.
Okay.
And we happen to be a distributor of Pico in Africa, but we build to any of them, Oculus and any of the headsets. We just found this one, comparatively good.
It's a great product match to what you need. Sure.
Yeah, exactly. So these are easier because we can actually, you push a button, you put it on, you don't need other hardware, you don't need Wi-Fi and internet. So obviously, in some circumstances with certain clients and with certain trainees, if they're in the field, it's easier.
Awesome.
So that's kind of on the delivery side. And we have this like awesome picture in Rwanda. With World Vision, we've actually trained over 20,000 people now in just one of the modules that we've done for them. They bought 700 Picos. It's a lot. That's
a lot for anybody. Come on. Can you imagine 700 virtual reality machines showing up? Are you kidding me? Wow.
Yeah, but they realize the potential and the power of VR, and so they want to do their training in VR moving forward. So they bought that. They've done 20,000 trainings already. It's quite amazing because we have this picture of all the mamas with their babies in their lap with their Picos on their heads. It's amazing. And people are like, are we ready for VR in Africa? I'm like, yes.
Oh yeah, we're ready. Yeah, come on, you got. I always find those questions really interesting, and I'm wondering if your light source is going to allow us to get to the content creation side. We may have to have a second session here, but maybe let's do 3 minutes on that. But I always find it funny because what we really have the opportunity for is leapfrogging, right? And that is where I just bang my head against the wall. Again, having been in the same sector for a very long time, when you'd go to an organization like an ICRC or a World Vision or whatever, and you just say, hey, this is great, but guess what's available today? It's over here. And that, it's just big. It was always just too much of a risk to try that or whatever. And I'm just like, yeah, but if you do this and you do it well, guess what? You just saved yourself 5 years of work, effort, time, sweat, tears, money, all that stuff. And you're there. So anyway, but maybe you're at a point of adoption. Maybe COVID has pushed. I'm so excited for people to do the research about what leapfrog moments happened because we were just forced to because of this darn thing. So
definitely. Anyway. Learning and we're all forced to everywhere. So now people understand the importance of it and they're not as scared. I had my I shouldn't say this, but my 81-year-old mother-in-law in experiencing the AMSA pilot in the Pico, and she was like, "This is amazing!" So I don't think there's age limits. No. I also put my 3.5-year-old son in it, so yeah, it's quite cool. But yeah, just quickly on the content side, we have instructional system designers on our team, and there's two kind of avenues in which you can go with modules. And a lot of times we do both in a module. So one is what we were talking about, sort of that 360 VR filming. And what people like about that is, for example, Feed the Future and Bear, they wanted to be in a agri-dealer shop in Nampula. They wanted. Yeah,
I want to be in the third tier medical center in the back. Like, I want to be able to turn around, see the whole thing. Yeah, sure. Makes sense. Yeah. Uh-huh.
Exactly. And so you do that, it's very localized, and it's quite cool because you're actually there. You're looking around and there's the streets of, Kigali if you're in Rwanda, and then the agri-dealer shop in Kigali. And then we also do kind of the 3D modeling side. So we, with the avatars and the 3D modeling. So yeah, you were mentioning health. So we could actually be in a operating theater in the middle of Ethiopia, and then to show you something more specifically or closely, we could do it in 3D model as well to kind of highlight some certain things. So those are kind of two styles in terms, and again, many times we use both, but there's pros and cons, for both of them. But the way that we structure it is usually in a style of, we have a pre-assessment. So we do like an intro and objectives and pre-assessment. And then we have multiple scenes with reinforcement questions in each of those scenes. And then we have a post-assessment. So immediately that data, if you're offline, then once you go back online, that data is sent to clients. If you're online, it's immediately sent. So you can also track, which is one of the big challenges we had, with in Fintech world with agent networks and trying to get their scores and are they taking tests and all of that, it immediately goes back to the client. So that's kind of how we kind of structure those modules. And it's a co-creation process. So we build it out for the most part. We have some generic ones. We're going to build out more generic ones because there's a lot of requests and that can help us lower costs. But for the most part, we're doing kind of a co-creation process over 70 days of building out the storyboard and, the voiceovers in all the languages and all the dialects you need and the development side with like weekly scrums with our client.
So awesome. I love it. I love it. I want to ask you this before you fade away. What are you most psyched about for the next 6 months? I mean, is it just more of the same? Is it holy smokes, we're growing so fast and I keep it coming? Or is there some shiny new object that you're really, really psyched about? Or when we tick over into 2022, what are you excited about?
So many things. Yeah, I mean, we're like almost there with a couple of really large scale partners that could open massive doors for us and help us, be able to build out a lot more content. And also we're delving into new sectors. So again, the medical side, like that's one of the things that brought me into VR. The power of being able to do VR training on the medical side is amazing, our healthcare side. And then, we are gonna start. So we've been self-funded, client funded basically for the last year and a half.
True bootstrap.
Yeah,
nice.
Like not taking money out of the company for a whole year during COVID. Not great financially, but so we're actually gonna look to raise. We started the process last year, and then we said let's put a pause on it and build up our kind of revenue and partner and client base, and then we're kind of finishing up our investment case now. So awesome. That's quite exciting because
super exciting. Natalie Miller, co-founder of XR Global. Again, what I love about this, my job the most, is that I could talk to you for the next 3 hours and we'd still have too much to talk about. So
it'd be very dark though.
Yeah, so we're going to put a pause in it there, but I'm certain that we're going to circle back with you because I want to see how this continues to roll out over the coming months and years. So thank you so much for your time today, but we'll put a pin in it there.
Awesome. Thanks so much for having me. I'd love to chat again.
Thanks again for tuning into today's episode of the eLearning Podcast. If you like what you've learned today in this episode, I encourage you to either follow us or subscribe to us on Facebook or Twitter or YouTube. And please do share this episode with 1 or 2 of your colleagues or friends. Also, I just want to remind you that you can level up your online learning game with all of the information that's available at the eLearning Success Summit. You can get your free ticket at elearningsuccesssummit.com. And finally, you can also stay up to date on everything that's important, all the news and the resources for e-learning professionals at lmspulse.com. Get our free newsletter by just going to lmspulse.com today. Thanks again.